On behalf of the INCO and the neighborhood councils, Mayor Flynn, thank you very much for a great presentation. Now, people were asking for the opportunity to ask questions of Mayor Flynn and City Manager Nyhoff. So this year we've arranged to have a moderator, Mr. David Maron, and he's here to help out with that, and the questions are all written. If you have further questions, please write them up, and I'm going to turn it over now to Mr. Maron. Thank you. And that was me in the 311.
Thank you, Len. How about a big hand for Len and all the work he did? Mr. Mayor, Mr. Nyhoff, we have probably over 60 questions, and we certainly don't have enough time to get them all in. So I'm going to try to get through as many. I'm going to try and group them, and I am going to try to cover all of the topics as best I can. I think we said maybe 3 minutes, but if you both are able to get through these a little faster, that'll help us out. Let's start with hopefully some easy ones. And there are some hard-hitting questions, and we'll get to those. But let's start off with the golf course. The question is, with the golf course losing $2 million a year, why is it still open, and who will be responsible for paying back the debt?
That's a great question, and many of you know that I support the fact that we have a great golf course in the city of Oxnard, but it has to be sustainable just like anything else that we do. Currently, and in the past decade, the golf course has not been sustainable. And that starts with a competitive bidding process. The golf course has never been competitively bid. So I've asked Mr. Nyhoff and the City Council to return to bids on the golf course. However, there's other cost-cutting measures that we're going to take a look at for that to make it more sustainable. You know, I don't know what Mr. Nyhoff thinks about it, but it offers a great amenity to this community, the golf course. But arguably, if such a small percentage of people actually play golf in the community, and it's such a drain on city resources, we really have to take a serious look at what we're doing. I'll just let Mr. Nyhoff respond in any way.
Thank you, Mr. Is this on? It is. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to quickly say thank you to all the staff members that are here tonight. I really appreciate them setting up the booths. The whole purpose of this is about our neighborhoods, and we wanted to make sure that people were here from the city that you could be in touch with tonight and know who to speak with regarding the services we provide. So I really want to say thank you to all the staff, and thank you for all of you as neighbors being here as well. So I will echo pretty much what the mayor had to say here. You know, golf courses are amenities in many communities. I've managed them in several other communities, and it's very typical that they're going to run a negative balance. But as the mayor said, there's been a contract for that to be operated for several years now, and when that comes up, we have to look at a new way of operating it so that at least it turns into a break-even operation. So there's some audit information we're going to work on. When that contract comes up in a couple of years, we're going to open that up, and we're going to seek to find a break-even contractor to run our golf course for us. So right now we're doing our best trying to keep those costs down, but I think in the future as we audit this and make sure it's done adequately, and then when we put it out to bid, we'll be looking for someone to operate it at no cost to the city.
Okay, thank you. And this next question is about new construction. Why are we doing new construction when we have such a water shortage? Why not a moratorium on new construction, and doesn't all these new developments increase the rates of the existing current ratepayers?
So that's an excellent question, and when I walk door to door, one of the things people will ask me is, Tim, why would there even be new construction if there's a drought? First of all, Wagon Wheel and River Park, those were entitlements, those were developments that were approved 10 and 15 years ago, right? So you don't, once you hit a water shortage, you don't renege on that commitment. It's a contractual agreement. So all of those developments, right, they will carry through, but what's positive is that the city needs to, I believe, take another look and not just having a zero-sum water policy, which means that any future development is supposed to contribute, make contributions to the infrastructure, to the great program and other mechanisms to provide water. So it's supposed to be a water-neutral policy. So the bottom line is that we need to actually look at whether we should have an ordinance rather than a policy. Because policies are kind of loosey-goosey. They can be negotiated. So I don't know what the city manager thinks about it, but every community has to have a certain level of growth. It's not if we grow, it's how we grow and how much.
Again, I'll echo pretty much what the mayor had to say. All of good cities that have utilities are going to look at long-range plans, 30-year plans, and you actually have growth projections. Oxnard's growth projection is to be another 60,000 to 70,000 people. And so you have to look at that in long range, and that's what the city has done. So when it comes to what the city's done, we look at that so there aren't impacts to existing residents. And we do have something, we haven't talked about the 128 recommendations that we have, but one of those is to reevaluate the fees that are charged developers for new development to ensure that they pay their fair share of that infrastructure. So those are just some things we have to do to move forward to make sure that burden isn't borne by all of you as residents.
All right, why don't we stop people from storing vehicles for long periods on the street?
So there's a cat and mouse game that the code compliance department, which many of you know, if you watch the council meetings, and I said to the city manager that, which I can't afford to do, but I was going to take a leave of absence from my job and volunteer at code compliance, and it's issues like these that drive me absolutely nuts, that somebody, I have a neighbor who owns 15 cars, but one guy, one family, and he just plays a cat and mouse game with reparking because you have a 72-hour limit, and it's just a cat and mouse game. I really think we need to take a look at it because, again, I know that for some individuals, automobiles are almost like children. They just can't, well, I don't want to use the word get rid of them because that's not appropriate, but my mom said that when I moved out. But they're just, I don't know, it's not right. And the laws in the state of California today are very loose about how many cars can one residence generate on public streets. You can have basically as many cars as you want. There's no limit. And that's a real problem in the city of Oxnard.
I will just again echo the mayor's comments there. I think one of the really important things that the council and why they've chosen quality of life as most important for a priority for this staff and for the community is that things like that impact our quality of life are addressed and we hear from you. And that's why the INCO is so important, the neighborhood councils, because we collectively want to know what in your neighborhood is lowering that quality of life. So, one of the other things that the council has said too for me when it comes to the city management is reconnect with your neighborhoods, reconnect with the businesses, become better partners than what we have in the past. All of those things don't happen overnight, but that's one thing really important to the council and the mayor is we want to hear from you and what are those big issues, and then whatever we legally can look at doing, we need to pass ordinances that don't allow that. But as the mayor said, there's a lot of rights we have as Americans that are protected. So we don't want to over code enforce and create so many laws we're the worst regulatory community in the state. On the other hand, we want to improve the quality of life for you. So it's that mix that we need to do and hear from all of you.
Okay, Mr. Nyhoff, we could probably start with you on this next one. There's actually quite a few questions about the controller's report. Mr. Mayor, you mentioned it during your presentation. Mr. Nyhoff, there was a city press release that stated, well, it seemed to insinuate the city was free and clear of any wrongdoing in the state controller's report. So the question is the report done? What is the results of the audit, and when will those be published so that the public can read it?
So number one is we've published everything we get from the state controller. Number two is the state controller did send a letter to the auditors, who they are auditing, and said there were no findings for single audits. And that is word used for celebration. For maybe some of you have watched, but we have been through extremely difficult time as a community, as an organization, as a staff, as a council, getting our fiscal house in order. It has been mismanaged. And so we have had a lot of experts come in and help us through this process. We had an audit done that had 107 findings. 107 findings. Maybe unless there's a few people that come to a lot of the council meetings that used to be in finance. We interviewed people today. Ask them, how many findings do you have in your community? 0. 107 findings is unheard of in the bad sense. So what we sent out was that they had the state controller sent a note that said, you have no findings on the single audit, and that's correct. Now there are other comments they're going to make on that, but I actually went to Sacramento, met with them, and they feel very comfortable that we've been through a lot with 107 findings that we look forward to a good report from them. But I will say this to you as a community. Some people have said, oh, you're not transparent, you're not, what are you doing here? We council, community, and staff said, let's do an organizational assessment to find out what we're doing right or wrong. The city auditor came forward and said, you have 107 things you're doing wrong, in addition to that. And we will manage those and we'll move forward to fix those. But what we really need to remember is, how are you financially, City of Oxnard? How are you? If it's 107 or 137 or 20 or 30, we need to know that to make sure we fix what's been broken in the past, and we will do that. But most importantly, we suffered through some very significant cost-reducing requirements that we actually had to use $16 million from your Measure O fund to balance, to have reserves in the general fund. So what I will say to you is I'm very proud that the audit has come back and said the things that you needed to do, as difficult as they were, cut $10 million, borrow that money to be paid back. The mayor indicated it in his presentation, that you did what's necessary, we were stabilized, and now we move forward. So for me, the message is the controller's going to write what they want to write, and we expect to have a positive response from them in our conversations with them. The only celebration letter we got from the state controller so far says no findings for our auditors regarding what's called single audits.
And I'm not sure I heard, is there a date when you expect to get that final report?
Well, I think that the state controller is going to give us that report when they finish it. So I don't have that timeline. They indicated hopefully in the next 3 to 4 weeks we would see something, but they're the ones who issue that report, and they issue that, they're auditing our auditors is what they're looking at. How did they go about performing our audit?
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor, during your presentation you talked a little bit about this, how the trash facility is actually saving the city over $2.5 million a year, but it also appears that we have this $40 million in debt service and all the improvements that are needed. So can you sort of explain, are we saving money or do we need more money?
Well, we're saving money at the trash facility. As I explained, about 10% of the total trash budget is the MRF. And there at the MRF, our contract used to be $6 million. And now it's down to, now us operating it, our costs are $4 million. So we're saving there $2 million, but as I stated earlier, there are investments that are needed at the MRF. There's not $20 million in debt. Currently, we're just about finished paying off the bonds on the equipment that needs to be replaced. And I think that's like any time now. But where there is a need for capital improvements are the trash haulers and the trash, trash trucks that actually pick up the trash. Those all have to be replaced. And so that's where there's the need for capital investment. And to answer your question directly, yes, rates need to be raised for trash, and that should be forthcoming. And I hope it takes place before the election.
Okay, we have quite a few questions on public safety, and I want to make sure we get at least some of these in. Let's start off with the question about, and of course when I ask you these questions, I'm quoting from the person who submitted it. You can correct me if the facts are different. But this one asks, do you believe that police response times of 4 to 8 hours are acceptable? If not, how do you plan to fix that?
Well, I'm going to say, if that's not a loaded question, I don't know what is. But there are times where people call the police department, and what it is that they're looking to do or what they're calling the police department about ranks as a very low priority compared to more serious crimes or occurrences that take place in the city. And so some might suggest that those response times are 4 hours, 10 hours, you know, whatever that amount of time is, because there are not enough police officers to respond to the calls for service. There are never enough police officers to adequately respond to calls for service. And the city manager might want to add to that.
First of all, you never want to hear any police response time that's 4 to 8 hours. I think what's important is, as the mayor said, there's different levels of importance when it comes to police response times. There are priority 1 calls, which are, there's an emergency situation you have, and those will be, are always monitored. We would want to make sure that those continue to be at a very low rate. And when we did the budget, even through the $10 million reductions, we met with the police chief, with the leaders of the police department, said, give us your lowest priority reductions that will have the least impact on service levels. So one of the things we did was we kept the same number of police officers on the street to respond to your calls. So some people say that, you know, you've cut so much from the budget. We kept the same number of police officers since I've been here on patrol, so that we made sure the number one thing that happens in the community is that you get the same response you have in the past when it comes to your emergencies. Some of the other ones have taken longer, I will agree with that, and we'd like to rebuild the department to be very efficient and effective, and I will challenge the chief to come up with the ways to do that most effectively. We'd never want someone waiting 4 to 8 hours for a police call, so that's something we certainly need to work on. We also, you know, once we stabilized this budget, we spent a year really wondering what was it for sure where we ended when it came to the city's finances. And after the audit report came through, it pretty much verified we had taken the actions necessary. So we actually added back, the council did 3 police officers into this budget already to start rebuilding that right back again. So I anticipate that that will continue as money is available. We'll continue to rebuild that department to be efficient and to really make sure we keep working on those response times.
Okay, and Mr. Mayor and Mr. Nyhoff, we do have a gentleman here who's sort of signaling you as we go from 2 minutes down to 1 minute, and we'll give you an indication.
Did I miss the stop sign?
Oh, by a mile, but 2 minutes. We'll try to do that. It's an indication to you. I'm not going to, you're not running for office, so I don't have to cut you off. But Mr. Nyhoff, maybe you could take 1 more minute to add to what you were just saying. The question is about public safety funding and staffing. It sounds like you do not feel it's appropriate right now. What do you think is appropriate levels for staffing and funding for a city of our size?
I mean, there's all sorts of areas that question. Are we talking public safety specifically?
Yes, public safety.
In both cases, what's most important for me and for the council to do in my perspective is what's that response time to get to your house if you're having a heart attack, if you have a major emergency, someone's breaking into your house. That's the one you want to make sure. So that response time is most important. Now, I'll also tell you is we all have checkbooks, we all have checking accounts. I would spend as much money as it took to have an ambulance and fire station on every block and a police car on every block if we could do that. That's just not possible. So we watch first and foremost what is the highest priority is going to be is get that response to you wherever you are in need of that emergency. That's always #1 priority. And that's what I would hope my leadership team does in police and fire is what they do is consistent with that priority, and I believe it is. I know you asked for a minute. Those are big questions to answer in 1 minute.
That's why I like my job and not yours.
I think the bottom line is, you know, the general fund supports money to repair your streets. The general fund supports money to maintain your parks and to build them. The general fund does a planning department. The general fund funds recreation. The general fund funds your police department. The general fund funds your fire department. So always molding all of those quality of life services together into what is the best for you is always difficult. The largest departments funding-wise are police and fire. Police is over $50 million. So we want to look at the #1 priority, which is your public safety, but we don't want to forget our libraries, parks, our planning, our streets, and recreation. So it's always a balance that elected officials have to do all across this country. No matter what city you're in, you have to take a good hard look at it, but I will say when it comes to public safety, our response time to you is most important, that we get there in X amount of time. Some of the lower things, you come home and somebody broke a window, you know, that is not an emergency call, there's no one in your house. So those would be lower priorities for us. I took more than a minute.
That's
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mayor, I think you may want to handle this next one. You talked a little bit about growth, economic development. So the question is about small business. So what are you doing to attract new business to downtown? What effects are you doing, or what efforts are you making to retain the businesses that are already here? And as one of the questioners states, certainly bringing in some of these large corporate shopping centers, restaurants, kills some of the small business. Please talk about those.
Well, there's no question that River Park has had, is a tremendous success. And something like River Park kind of reminds me a little bit about when Oxnard built the Esplanade in the early 70s. And actually the migration away from downtown took place much earlier, because in South Oxnard, a lot of the amenities that used to be exclusive to the downtown also spread to the south end. Again, remember as a kid, my mom taking us, and we used to go to the south end, we used to go to Bourbon's near Santa Clara High School, we used to go to the Esplanade, and then things slowly got taken away from the downtown. So what we are looking to do is create a new experience downtown that cannot be experienced at a place like River Park or elsewhere. And what I'd like to see is a more authentic version of River Park downtown. What do I mean by a more authentic? Not chains, but rather restaurants that are owned by individual restaurant owners, not by chains, bookstores, etc. in the downtown. And so the renewed focus will be to recreate that experience. And to answer your question directly about what are you doing to help smaller businesses, there's nothing more that a person could do to help smaller businesses than have a one-stop shop. The one-stop shop came about because of complaints from small business people, in particular about exposing the deficiencies of our permit center and the way we do business.
I have 30 seconds. I just want to really encourage everybody to participate in the downtown revitalization vision. It is our one-shot opportunity. We have $6.2 million. We're looking at facade improvements, certainly investing back in the infrastructure to make it a unique place. Downtowns survive when they're unique and they're not like shopping centers. So we need the local people to do that, the small businesses to do that, and that would be our goal moving forward.
Well, you've partially answered this next one. We have two gems in Oxnard, the harbor and the historic district. When will they get some overdue attention?
Well, as I said about the historic district, I'm from the Wilson neighborhood. I live in the historic neighborhood. And for a long time, residents, not only in the historic district, but surrounding the historic district, have asked for the city to devote more attention to the district. I think the city has had a role previously when we had a redevelopment agency, and the city could take redevelopment funds and place them into neighborhoods like historic districts, as Heritage Square was. Heritage Square was a redevelopment project. So it's taking those old farming, 150-year-old homes and putting them at Heritage Square. That was a redevelopment project. And there was a lot of discussion about what redevelopment funds could be spent in the historic districts. The redevelopment agency now is gone. So the city has to evaluate. It can't randomly spend money on any one entity or any one area. And so I think grant writing is extremely important. And I think that I would like to see the city partner more with the historic neighborhood to find mutually beneficial things for both the neighborhood and the citywide.
Here's a quick one. When are you going to be able to invest money for a recreational park?
The city of Oxnard and parks, we have parks commissioners here. The Parks and Rec Commission has changed to add new amenities to parks. One could argue that parks in the city of Oxnard historically have been very recreation focused, and in particular very youth focused, as they should be. They should be focused on recreation and youth. But we've had people that have come forward from neighborhoods and say, you know what, I have dogs, I'd like a dog park. Many people come forward and said that. We just opened a dog park at Campus Park. There are people that want additional amenities just other than just recreation. But we need to find additional ways to provide recreational opportunities for a very young population that we have. And we do, as I've stated before, we have a lot of overcrowding in the city of Oxnard, and it really places a real burden on city government to try to figure out how are you going to provide those services, not just for youth, recreation, but everything that you do. And one of the other things we need to do is we need to eliminate overcrowding as a solution, part of the solution to the problem.
I may be a little bit of the, well, no, I'll just tell you, I'll be a city manager that has done this for a lot of years. We have just seen a significant impact to our finances, and service levels have been reduced. And at the same time, as I look at Measure O, which does have some money available to potentially build a park, if once I build it, we can't maintain it, which we've had to reduce our maintenance levels, it doesn't make sense right now to go build a park when we can't maintain it. So we're going to look for partners to work with us. So let's build those parks. Let's look at, there's some Measure O money we could do that, but we have to find the partnerships in order to maintain that. One of the things you have with your Measure O, which you saw the millions of dollars that come in every year, almost all of that's already earmarked for public safety. Station 8's all funded through, fire stations all funded through Measure O. Those will run out, and you'll either have to re-up that tax, or we have to figure out a way to maintain it in existing revenue sources. So I'm really going to be cautious as your city manager to recommend building something new that we'll have difficulty maintaining now until we put ourselves on solid fiscal ground. We've got reserves in the account, replacement money, all the things that have been drained for years before we really invest in things we have to maintain. So we got to do it differently. We got to do it with partnerships, with youth organizations, whatever that takes to see if we can lessen that maintenance cost so we can build those recreational facilities we want to see.
Okay, this is the only question about it, ties into what you spoke of, the downtown area. So the downtown continues to struggle due in part to the homeless population. So how do you plan to address that issue if you're trying to attract more people downtown who may be uncomfortable with the homeless population?
Well, that's an excellent question. There are 1,800 homeless people in the last count in the county of Ventura. 2/3 of all the homeless in Ventura County live in Oxnard and Ventura, ostensibly because of the climate. And Oxnard has a large homeless population. Many of these people are chronically homeless, and mental health is directly connected with the chronically homeless. I believe in a more assertive strategy of getting people help that are mentally ill and are chronically homeless. And also the city's going to take a look, I think, at the mid-year budget at funding organizations that provide services to the homeless, because it is true, there's going to be a real problem trying to attract, especially, I'm going to just cut to the chase, women, children, and their elderly downtown if they think in any way it's not a safe experience. Right now, it's a safe experience downtown, but it doesn't contribute to a safe experience if they're homeless downtown, or homeless anyway for that matter. So Oxnard is going to need to take further steps to more assertively deal with the homelessness issue, and there are many proposals that have come forth from many organizations about permanent housing, about providing social services and mental health services to individuals that are service resistant. And that's a big issue for many homeless, not all homeless, but many chronically homeless people not only suffer from mental illness, they're service resistant, and we need to overcome that.
May I just take 30 seconds? You see the 4 strategic priority boards here on each side. You might want to take a look at it. One of the high priorities is quality of life, which we talked about public safety. We also, homelessness shows up on that as a priority for the city council. We did actually put 2 additional positions, one in housing and one in the police department, to work on as a homeless liaison to really focus on that. And I'm sure we'll be back with some recommendations, because it's not only impactful to them, but it is impactful to residents and to the downtown area.
All right, we have quite a few questions about consultants. They're tough questions that I'm sure you'll both be able to answer. I'm going to try to combine several of these. So number one, is there an actual timeline for when the city will sever ties with the consultants? So how long do we continue with consultants? And number two, as far as the money that's been spent, how much has been spent in the last couple of years, and how much of that was no bid? The person who wrote this thinks that there was some agreement that there would no longer be no bid contracts. So if you can talk about how long we'll continue to have consultants, how much have we been spending, and the no bid issue.
So I'd like to say something in a very general sense about consultants. All cities have consultants. Consultants are a way that very specialized labor can be performed at oftentimes a lower cost. Sometimes it's not, as we found out from the trash facility. And that's why it's important that a city council and city management has a handle on those consultants. As far as the timeline, it's a very vague question. I think the implication is that this city manager and the city council supporting his recommendations came in with a finance department, human resources department, and city staff that was left as a vanquished skeleton of its former self. No staff to get certain jobs done. And we relied on consultants to provide specialized advice. Landscape maintenance districts are an excellent example of that. The goal from the city council, and continuously we've seen this come before the city council, is that every person on the city council, including myself as mayor, would like to wean the city off of consultants. So does the city manager. He can address the amount spent and maybe some time periods. But I appreciate the question.
The question's been asked on numerous occasions of me, and I would send a note to me at greg.nyhoff@oxnard.org. I've given and made public a very thorough report about the city's use of subject matter experts to help us through this situation. So the answer to that is we are absolutely weaning ourselves away from those that helped us do the assessment for this organization that had been hidden for years. And then as I have a whole new staff, so as you see that turnover occurs, we always bring those in, because not only are we trying to fix a lot of things in the past, we're still trying to run an organization at the same time. So we will use subject matter experts as necessary, but as least often as we possibly can. But cities, I don't care where you are, and I've been through several cities, you'll always use consultants. They can be cheaper. We use a contract consultant sometime because too many plans come into our planning department. So we use a contract consultant to do a plan review. We use them for our benefits program. So I just welcome you. Send me a note at my email or call the office. Be happy to provide that report to anybody in the community that really goes through, not just those that helped us through this very difficult financial situation we found ourselves in, but help us on a regular basis as a city.
Fair enough. Can you talk a little bit about no bid? Why is that necessary?
So the city council, since I've been mayor, the city council has really put its foot forward to say, we need to end no bid contracts. That was part of the old boy network that has been pervasive. I mentioned the golf course contract. That's an excellent example. It's probably one of the few remnants of a no-bid contract passed in the city of Oxnard. And what's wrong with no-bid contracts? Well, there's a lot wrong with it, because if contracts aren't openly and competitively bidded, then in essence, it's what's called an exclusive negotiating agreement. And those ENAs, exclusive negotiating agreements, don't get the taxpayers the best price. So it should be the goal of every organization to not allow ENAs, exclusive negotiating agreements. And that's what happened on our trash facility, by the way, right? However, I know that there are instances, and Mr. Nyhoff can elaborate on them, where some of the consultants that the city has hired for a variety of tasks, that their firm has been retained to provide a variety of services. The same firm that's already been competitively bid has then been retained to provide a variety of services. For general law cities in the state of California, not charter cities, but general law cities, there are very strict guidelines about open bidding, about how much time it takes, about how those bids are. That's the air conditioning system. We just got it up and running. Anyway, and there are very strict guidelines about it. And so, and it's very time consuming. But I, for one, all right, was on the city council when those no bid contracts were just a way of doing business. Now, no bid contracts are an exception, not the rule. Before in Oxnard, they were definitely the rule. Mr. Nyhoff.
The city of Oxnard has purchasing policies of which you have requirements of when you go out for bid, when you don't have to go out for bid, and they're followed. And if we do not follow them, we need to be held accountable for that. There are times, one area that allows for no bid would be the city attorney's office. So we have a particular legal claim that the city attorney will look at who available is a subject matter expert to hire to defend the city in that lawsuit, and that person, that firm would be hired to do that. So when it comes to professional services, there are times that you don't go through the bidding process, but always there are policies and procedures in place for purchasing with the city that you have to follow. So you're welcome to take a look at those as well and see what those are. We need to update them based on, they're quite old, so we do need to update them to make sure it reflects what the city expects from the staff. So that's just another thing on the list of 128 things that we need to make sure are updated so it reflects the desires of our elected officials.
Okay, thank you for giving a complete answer on that. It was helpful. So let's look about, well, Mr. Mayor, you've been in politics forever. You know the truth about how people worry about what's local to them. And let's talk about potholes, asphalt. So the questions are, when are we going to start putting new asphalt in the alleys around Via Marina? What about repaving some of the local streets? And if there's a street fund, why is that not being used to pay for some of these repairs that we need? Can you please talk about the streets?
Absolutely. I think it's an excellent question. I'm glad the question was asked. So about 7-8 years ago, the city the city council was presented with a streets number. What was the actual number in terms of cost to get Oxnard streets up to par? $200 million. $200 million. Now, I want to separate this. Residential streets are separate from arterial roadways, as I stated earlier, like Rose, like Rice, 5th Street, Victoria, larger streets. That money comes from federal funds that are allocated through the Ventura County Transportation Commission, VCTC. We get funding for about one of those roads a year, approximately, okay? So the remaining streets, what I insisted was a 3-year time schedule rather than a proposed 10-year time schedule. That's where we borrowed the Measure O money. We borrowed $2 million over a 15-year period to pay $2 million a year of Measure O money for a $20 million bond to get every remaining residential street paved in a 3-year time period. The only gap that we have right now, not just via Marina, is every single alley in the city arguably needs help. We have a $40 million price tag. The city has not identified the funds for that $40 million price tag. We also have a need for $8 million a year in just maintenance costs alone. And if I'm not mistaken, we're nowhere near that $8 million in providing that for maintenance costs. So once again, when we talk about balancing public safety and we talk about balancing, libraries and parks and everything else, it's a very fine balance between all of these entities.
I think just echoing the mayor's comments again, we will actually be showing up in the next 60 days, which is called Pavement Management Index. So we look at the major arterial roads, we look at the neighborhood streets, they look at alleys, and alleys would be one of the low use areas. So first you're going to look at paving those high need arterials. So we'll come up, you will see a plan that goes through what are our highest priorities. And then as the mayor said, and I think he was pretty right on with the backlog of money we would need to catch up, is very, very significant. But again, we're trying to really become really be programmed in what we do and be fiscally sound from the very beginning. So we spend money that we have, and then we just are going to have to better manage those areas that need extra services and really focus on how do we approach those areas as their highest priorities for the city. I've been in the business over 30 years, and there's never been a time when I had more money than I needed to take care of every request that's in the city. So lots of people complaining about trees. We only have 2 people left trimming trees for us. So as the mayor said, continuing to balance that is important. And our best job is to put as many plans in place everybody can see and be transparent. These are our needs, and then we prioritize them as a community, as a council, as a staff, and then we just attack those priorities.
Thank you. Staff is letting me know we only have a few minutes left. I'm sorry, we have a ton of questions, but maybe we can knock out a few things real fast here. This isn't even a question, just want to share it with the both of you. The questioner recommends that the Cowboys practice field be turned into a park, not more homes. So think about that. Mr. Nyhoff, is there something called a harbor task force in the city?
Yes, I can answer that question.
And really the question is, if there is one, if you have some staff person, maybe they could raise their hand so this person could go over and try and get invited to the next meeting?
Actually, that person can come to me, and I think we're looking to hold the meeting on the 3rd week of September, and it's called the Channel Islands Harbor Task Force. This was a task force that had never met until I resurrected it 3 years ago, to deal with very important issues as they relate to Channel Islands Harbor, and specifically the partnership between the city of Oxnard and the county of Ventura. So that task force has not met in approximately a year, and we're looking in the next 2 weeks to discuss a services agreement between the county and city, which we've held up over a variety of reasons. And so if anyone would like to find out, I believe it's the 3rd Thursday of the month, but if that person approaches me, I'll get their number, make sure they find out when the task force meeting is being held.
All right, for your information, there's several questions about traffic congestion and hoping to do something about that. There's questions about litter and weeds, so I think the best thing is we'll save all these questions. They can go to your departments, so you'll know what's on the minds of the local consumers.
Mr. Maron, just about traffic very quickly. In 2008, I led an effort to deal with traffic called the Oxnard Traffic Initiative. It was soundly defeated by, I think it was 61 to 39% here in the city of Oxnard. But out of that defeated initiative came a $9 million response by the city of Oxnard, which acknowledged that we do have a traffic problem. A $9 million ITS, Intelligent Traffic System, which right now, if I'm not mistaken, the last component of that system, because all the hardware has been installed, it needs a $240,000 software package, and that will be fully operational to make sure that the flow through intersections is a lot faster. So although the traffic initiative didn't succeed, it did cause the prioritization of spending of money, and so there is traffic relief on the way.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, I think there's quite a few questions here about consultants' finances. I want to give you the last question here to talk about Mr. Nyhoff. There's questions about his salary, his contract. You've worked closely with him. Please share your views of his performance, and we'll wrap up with that.
Well, I think that Greg Nyhoff has been one of the best things that's ever happened in the city of Oxnard in terms of its government. Arguably, we should have looked for a city manager like Mr. Nyhoff earlier. It's a regret that I have that we should have looked for a city manager when our previous city manager was put on leave. However, everything happens in life for a reason. And had we started that search earlier, then maybe the city of Oxnard would not have had such a qualified candidate like Mr. Nyhoff. When Mr. Nyhoff came to the city of Oxnard, he told the city council that once his findings were complete, they were not going to be popular and pretty, especially the remedies, because the remedies have involved cuts. He's been widely criticized for some of those cuts. The recommendations that he's made about how to deal with these funds that were depleted That wasn't popular. A lot of things he's had to do have not been popular. And I'll tell you that there were a lot more people at the very first public gathering, and Mr. Nyhoff was there, and of course I was there. We were answering questions. And I think the fact is that he has done exactly what I've wanted him to do, and I believe the city council has wanted him to do. And he's not popular with certain constituencies that I believe wielded disproportionate amounts of influence over the city management staff. He's a more balanced person, a more balanced leader, and he's provided us with leadership at a time where, had he not come to this city 2 years ago, I cannot say where we'd be today, and it would not be in a good place. I support him 100%. No, it's not a love fest. Someone said once, "You have a love fest with the city manager?" I think Great Nyhoff is the best thing in my government experience that's happened to this city, and I support him 100%.
Thank you. Now, yes, let's give them both a nice round of applause. I think you could argue that maybe if your question wasn't asked, but I think you have to admit they were not evasive. They tried to answer the questions tonight. I applaud them both for that effort. And in a moment, Len's going to come back up, but how about one last round of applause for our two.
I didn't get a chance to give an hour-long presentation like the mayor had.
It wasn't an hour, it was 25 minutes.
So if I could just make a comment. Thank you for those comments, Mayor. I want to say this to you as a community, and including all the staff members that are here with the city. It was an extremely difficult time for everyone. For everyone. But if you watch tonight, and I would hope what you gather from tonight is the optimism that we have looking forward. As a city manager, I'm very optimistic that we did the difficult things. And why drag out the difficult things for 10 or 5 more years and keep working at that? So I look at our stabilization, I look at the strategic goals, I look at the partnerships that we're going to need to grow with all of you to regain your trust and to move forward, to move Oxnard, believe in Oxnard and move it forward. So I get so many compliments from the 200,000 people that live here, not all of them, that continue to support the fact that they want effective, efficient, and a solvent community and city that prioritizes their needs and works with them. And that would be the goal, and I'm very excited about our future as a city. And there is a lot of positive to look forward to. We haven't even really had a chance to engage the positive side. I'll be candid with you as a city manager. It's been only trying to fix what has happened from the past. And I am so excited about the next few years here that we get to revitalize downtown, strengthen neighborhoods, and all of the things that the mayor went through will only grow exponentially in the future because Oxnard is a beautiful and great city that has potential, and let's start really realizing it.
Thank you. And before we end here, you know, there are a lot of people that made this happen. And one of them here is David behind not only David Maron. Let's give David Maron a round of applause. But David Zamudio behind the curtain here. We have Caesar, we have Luis, we have Delana in the back. On the event planning stage, there were so many other people that did things that were so crucial to make this happen. Thank you very much. This was a great event. I'm looking forward to future events. And Mr. Schulman, thank you too for your leadership on the INCO. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't want to hold you any longer. I just want to give my thanks to Mr. Maron and remind you elections are coming up and they're going to be quite interesting. So the INCO is going to have a couple of candidate debates in October. We're going to have, and David Maron will be our moderator of both of them. He does a good job. Anyhow, for City Council, it will be on October 13th, and for the Mayor, it will be on October 17th, and they will be in the main auditorium. We can support a lot of people there. We have 1,600 seats, so please come. I hope everybody learned something here tonight, and I am now adjourning the meeting. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. And there is a chamber breakfast tomorrow. That's a candidates forum, so you should know about that. Thank you.